Hello everyone. Now you will hear a brief retelling of the movie Horizon Line. Enjoy the movie. While on her dream vacation on the stunning island of Mauritius, Sarah starts dating Jackson, her diving instructor, who opens her eyes to life beyond the corporate world. As they go over their photos on their last day, Jackson begs Sarah to remain, but she can't as she has a crucial job in London. Sarah waits for Jackson to use the restroom before leaving without saying goodbye since she detests saying goodbye. She is obviously upset about this. Jackson returns outside and is devastated beyond belief. Sarah receives a message from a friend in Mauritius announcing her impending marriage and asking Sarah to be her maid of honor a year later while she goes about her regular business in London. Sarah, of course, agrees, and a little while later, she arrives at the island eager to have some fun. She first makes a visit at an old friend's house to get whiskey and unintentionally finds herself being pursued by a dog. The owner calls the dog back right away and extends a warm greeting to Sarah as she climbs the fence. He asks her whether she has already seen someone after loading her vehicle with booze, but Sarah acts as though she has no idea who he is referring to. Sarah then goes swimming in a waterfall with her buddies, and they take a rest in a pub afterward. Sarah's pal questions if she'll remain this time, but she's adamant about her London job. Sarah covers her face as her pal says that Jackson has since opened his own diving school and she realizes he's close by. When Sarah attends a beach party in the evening, she finds that Jackson is also present. She talks to him after working up the guts, but the exchange is strained and uncomfortable. With a weak explanation about needing to go to work, Jackson walks out, but Sarah follows him and offers to accompany him home. Jackson is reluctant at first, but eventually he accepts. When they get home later, they enjoy some drinks together and Sarah tells him how well he did in school, which makes Jackson confess that he was motivated by Sarah's drive. As the evening wears on, Sarah and Jackson have numerous tender moments to share, which leads Sarah to confess she has been missing him. Jackson, on the other hand, is upset and says he doesn't see the sense in dating her if she will simply walk out on him. Jackson notes he would never be content in London when Sarah offers for him to travel with her. After a disagreement, they end up kissing and staying the night together. The next morning, Sarah receives a call from a friend informing her that she is running 30 minutes behind schedule and that they would have to leave quickly as the only ferry on the island that travels to the wedding destination. Sarah quickly leaves the house to ask her old friend Freddie for a favor. Since he is a pilot, he can take her to the wedding in his own plane. Sarah doesn't want to miss the wedding. Because he is also attending the wedding, Jackson boards the aircraft, but he is not in a good mood because Sarah walked away without saying anything. Freddie advises Sarah to take a seat in the co-pilot seat so they can catch up once they are in the air. Freddie uses the opportunity to review some of the plane's functions, such as how to operate the autopilot and maintain stability, because she used to teach flying lessons. This will help her support him when it comes time for him to get up from his seat and take his medication. They converse briefly about their personal lives as well, and Freddie admits he is still in mourning for his late wife, of whom he carries a photograph on the aircraft. Sarah calls at Jackson to fetch some water when Freddie starts coughing unexpectedly, but he is unable to do so. When Sarah realizes that Freddie is suffering a heart attack, she attempts to comfort him, but instead of passing out, Freddie collapses and hits Jackson in the head when the plane plummets. Just then, a flying oxygen tank strikes the control panel and windshield from behind. As Sarah takes the yoke and frantically attempts to recall what Freddie ordered her to do to get the jet to go higher and stay stable ahead, Jackson arrives and pulls Freddie from the pilot seat. Fortunately, the aircraft stabilizes just in time to avoid crashing into the sea. Subsequently, Jackson attempts CPR on Freddie, but at this point, nothing can save him, he is simply gone. When he asks Sarah whether she can pilot the aircraft, she admits she couldn't do much because she just took a few lessons 2 years ago. The pair tries using their phones, but they don't have any signal up there, so she examines the damage and discovers that the GPS is damaged. After a few unsuccessful attempts at using the radio, they try the autopilot, but discover that it is also malfunctioning. They may not have enough petrol to transport them somewhere safe, which exacerbates the situation. They barely have half a tank remaining. Since the compass at least functions, they attempt to determine their previous orientation using their watches and establish a countdown for when they will spin the plane around once more. Unfortunately, Sarah is helpless as a massive, black storm materializes in front of them. It is then when a voicemail from Samuel arrives on the radio. Sarah informs him that Freddie passed away and that they are currently piloting the aircraft, but as they approach the storms, the signal is lost. Samuel returns after a few static-filled seconds to inform them that the storm is too big for him to fly around, but before he can offer them any advice, the signal is lost once more. Sarah is seated opposite Jackson, so she may take up the pilot position, but she is still unsure of what to do when the plane is struck by lightning, causing it to tremble as it passes through the night. Sarah, struggling to maintain control, makes the decision to attempt flying above the storm and ignores Jackson's concerns that they are ascending too high. Eventually, Sarah works very hard to steer the aircraft in the proper direction, and they soon find themselves in a clear sky. Unfortunately, the height also causes them to feel ill. Sarah drops out from poor vision, which causes the plane to plummet even further into the storm. Sarah wakes up and never quits battling with the yoke even after the jet goes out of control and the black clouds block their view. When she finally succeeds in leveling the aircraft again after much effort, she finds that the compass has also malfunctioned. With the help of a needle and some liquid, Jackson creates a compass out of a school project that provides Sarah with the instructions she needs to navigate safely through the storm. They eventually emerge from the storm a few seconds later, but there is very little gasoline remaining. Sarah swiftly changes to the reserve tank after remembering about it, but the second gasoline tank rises strongly for a split second before rapidly falling. Jackson chooses to take the chance and walk outside to mend the tank, which is situated on the plane's wings, after tying his body to the aircraft with ropes since he believes there could be a leak. Although Sarah dislikes the thought, she is forced to stay inside and operate the aircraft as she watches in terror as Jackson ascends to the front of the craft. He confirms the leak there by opening the engine, which causes gasoline to start spewing in his face right away. It took him several attempts to get the duct tape application just perfect due to wind and speed. The gasoline gauge also stabilizes once the opening is sealed. Jackson tries to get back into the aircraft, but he stumbles and falls, hanging beneath the wing. Sarah, who is scared, tries to assist him, but when she leaves the yoke alone, the plane begins to veer. Sarah finds a solution to this issue by putting the seatbelt around the yoke, which keeps the aircraft stable. Jackson raises his fingers to grasp her hand as she races across to him, but he gets smashed against the side of the aircraft instead. After exerting extra effort, Sarah is able to grab him, drag him inside, and learn that he suffered a serious injury to his arm during the battle. Sarah takes one of the alcohol bottles intended for the wedding and uses it to clean the wound. Jackson takes a sip before they apply the alcohol to the wound, which burns quite a little. Sarah uses the opportunity to snap his arm back into place while telling him how she always remembers their time together to take his mind off of the agony. She then uses a hanger to form a temporary splint, covers his arm in bandages, and compliments him on his wonderful act. They then decide to continue flying till they locate land since they see the fuel indicator is at 5%. Sarah decides it would be a good idea to lighten the plane in order to reduce fuel use, so they begin hurling objects out of the plane, frightening a few people with a sudden rain of objects. The concept functions and keeps the fuel gauge consistent. At that point, Sarah realizes that Jackson is implying that they should also dispose of Freddy's body when he poses a challenging issue. Jackson reassures her that their survival is more crucial even if it makes her feel awful. After placing the wife's photo in Freddy's corpse and forcing him off the aircraft, Sarah, brokenhearted, takes the time to mourn his passing. Sarah then wants to get rid of the booze, but Jackson tells her that because it includes ethanol, it may be used as fuel. Considering that Jackson is injured, Sarah determines that this time she will take the risk since she believes it is a good idea. She gently and slowly makes her way to the top of the aircraft, holding onto a wing while she releases the fuel tank valve. The wind is too fierce for the bottle to stay in her hands when Jackson delivers it to her. Jackson tries again in a hurry, and this time it works. Sarah puts 3 bottles into the valve one by one. Jackson had no option but to ask her to return inside after inadvertently dropping the final one he was going to give her on board the aircraft. Though Sarah attempts to advance cautiously, she nearly lets go and manages to get hold of the top of the plane's bar. She leaps aboard the plane, relieved, but also experiencing a slight panic attack. Subsequently, Jackson acknowledges that he could have seen an island during their alcohol-related activities. It's dangerous to go back in case they make a mistake and burn up all the gasoline, but Sarah chooses to believe what Jackson says. As the fuel gauge keeps dropping, she flips the aircraft around and they start searching for the island that Jackson observed. Sadly, they discover nothing, and eventually the tank runs out, forcing the aircraft to shut down. For a little period, but not for long, it will be gliding. Sarah and Jackson apologize to one another, thinking that this is the end, for being egotistical and not paying closer attention to one another's needs. Additionally, Sarah admits that she detests saying goodbye since it makes her want to remain. Jackson then notices the island he had earlier seen, but they still need to find out how to get the plane down safely. Jackson attempts to help Sarah, who hardly knows the fundamentals, but the plane still plummets rapidly and crashes violently into the lake. The pair is rendered unconscious as the plane unexpectedly turns over. The aircraft gradually descends and comes to rest on the brink of an undersea precipice on the ocean bottom. Sarah regains consciousness as the plane starts to fill with water, and she makes a valiant but unsuccessful attempt to rouse Jackson. As soon as the entire cockpit fills with water, Sarah fights for a few seconds to get the door to open, and then she swims to the surface right away. She starts yelling for Jackson as soon as she can breathe again, but he never shows up. Sarah swims back down, determined not to give up on him, and finds the plane on the verge of falling off the edge. Just as the jet plummets, Sarah swiftly takes a life jacket, places it over Jackson, and inflates it. Luckily, Jackson's body has drifted up and is now trapped in the wing. Sarah swims up and carries Jackson to the island as the plane vanishes into the abyss. There, she gives him CPR until he comes to. Sarah chuckles, happy, and they both collapse into the beach, exhausted. After many hours, they feel the water getting too near, and that's when they wake up. When Jackson discovers that they are indeed on a sandbar that will go with the tide, Sarah is in disbelief and sobs over the reality that they are never truly safe. The pair is left floating in the sea as the tide goes out, and their limbs are becoming sore from having to keep their bodies up and swim against the flow. Jackson seizes the opportunity to tell Sarah he loves her as she starts to cry and understands all their efforts were in vain because they would die here nonetheless. As they await the worst, she gives the words back and they share a kiss. It is then that a rescue boat finally arrives to take them to safety. Sarah becomes anxious when she sees a few shadows underwater, but fortunately they are able to swim across and board the boat, arriving at safety in the end. The pair decides there won't be any more farewells since they don't think they are still living.